In 2016, my father's body lay in a hospital room in another state, and I crossed him over to the light before his body expired. Hello, and welcome to the Charmed Life podcast. This podcast is all about magic, metaphysics, mysticism, and the unconditional love of the universe. And I am your host. My name is Tricia Carr. Welcome to this second episode in a series called Multidimensional. I'm Tricia Carr. I am a multidimensional channel, an animal telepath, a teacher of astral mastery and all things psychic. I'm also a 5-1 reflector in human design and a Pisces sun, and I'm here on my last incarnation. I'm on a mission to help people to awaken or reawaken their extraordinary abilities. And so that way we can all live out our true purpose. Like I said, this is the second episode in a series called Multidimensional, which is inside my YouTube channel and also my podcast called Charmed Life with Tricia Carr. So you can find the series on YouTube, and you'll also be able to watch it or listen to it on many other platforms. So let me tell you a little bit about this story of my father. First of all, to give you the context of my relationship with my father, I actually didn't see him after age 13. I saw him once when I was 19, and then flash forward to age 40, and I saw him a couple of times until he passed in 2016. Basically, my father was a person who was very sick with rage and alcoholism and many other debilitating things, including violence. And it was difficult, my family of origin. And my mother and I left him when I was 11. And then we moved out of state when I was 13. And I, again, saw him only one time as a young adult at 19. And then saw him just before he passed. The last year before he passed, I saw him two times. So I when I lost my father, meaning when he passed, it wasn't really a loss. I'd only had a couple of interactions with him, so it wasn't like the typical losing a parent. But here's the really cool part that comes into why I'm even talking about it on this series. In 2016, I had been open to my extraordinary abilities, my abilities as a medium, a multidimensional medium, and it actually began with being an animal communicator. And I had been open to these abilities for under 2 years. I think by the time he passed, it was, yeah, a year and a half, but it happened really fast, honestly. I was a professional at the time that he actually this event occurred. I was a professional medium and animal communicator. And so what happened was my father was he had had like a stroke-like event, and he was in the hospital in another state, and there were many really interesting events that occurred to basically show the synchronization of everything. First of all, it was the day before he technically passed. I was driving over Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles, and was suddenly felt I remember it so viscerally. I felt this I felt something shift, and I just knew, I guess that claircognizance, I just knew that my father had exited his body and that he was not to return. He's not to be able to get back into his body. Did know that he was in the hospital. I did know that he had had some strokes and hit his head and these different things, but I didn't know all of the nuances of what was going on hour to hour. But my sisters were there, and they were somewhat keeping me up to date. So a few moments after I had this knowing that my father had exited his body, I got a call from one of my sisters, and I answered the phone and I said, "He left his body and he's not gonna go back in." And she said, "I knew something happened, that's why I'm calling you." Now, when I say that, he was not expired. His body was still alive. So what had happened was basically he was out of body, having OBE, an out of body experience, but his body had not released yet. All of my sisters being very intuitive naturally, even if they don't have it as developed, and they're certainly not doing it professionally, but my sister when you're in this kind of existential event, even though I wasn't close to my father in a relational sense, it's still very primal and existential. It's a ancestral thing that's happening. And so we had this kind of exchange happening. So after my sister and I had this shared knowing of my father exiting his body and seeming to not be able to go back in, I got home and I got into meditation and I reached out to my father telepathically, remotely, and he was kind of like all woozy and like kind of blissful. He just chilling. And I was, like, remote viewed into where he was, and it was like he was kinda just floating around the hospital room, just like this little "woo," like on a cloud kind of. And I was communicating with him, and he was indicate like, basically, he thought that he was just high on some drugs or medicine from the hospital, and maybe he was also that in his physical body, and that's how he kinda lived it out. And he just thought he was high, and he was like, "Oh, hey, baby Tricia," because that's what he would call me. And I said, "Are you," asking, "How are you? Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah," he was all tripping high. And I asked him if he had seen his parents because I was assuming that it was close to his time since he couldn't it seemed to me he couldn't get back in his body. And he just kinda said, "Oh, yeah, mama and daddy are here," and I was like, "Okay, well, if you need anything, you can find me." "Okay, but you're my baby Trisha, you're my angel." And I was like, "Sure, I'm your angel." So that was a kind of interesting, trippy experience, whatever. Concluded the experience and went about my evening, and then the next morning, this was the day. The next morning, I went into my morning meditation, and as I settled in, boom, my dad had astral projected to me in my space so viscerally. Here's the thing with astral projection when you are embodied and something or someone else, only someone's can do it, astral projects to you. I've had this happen with my cat who astral projected to comfort me while I was on a plane and I was nervous. It's like there's everything except for being able to see it with your physical eyes. It is distinctive. I mean, I could clairvoyantly see him. I could viscerally feel him, and he was, boom, right there. And he was freaking out because he was no longer on this, "Oh, I'm just tripping on some drugs." He was, "I can't get back into my body, and I'm freaked out." So the first thing that I did was I kinda collected myself, and I put up a wall of light and just kind of separated him for a moment just to get myself grounded because as being a very empathic, I felt the surge of his freak out. So I just sent him over on the other side of a wall of light for a moment, and I grounded, and I knew what I needed to do. Before I tell you about what I did with my dad, I wanna tell you what the medium's job is in the time when there is someone who is no longer expressed physically. So they are in that moment earthbound. Now, typically the body has expired. That is a typical way that things happen. That's not what has happened to my father's, but I'll pick that up here in a moment. Hollywood, the show Medium and all these, they have this thing where they go, "Oh, a spirit can't cross over until they solve something." Or no, no. The only thing that a spirit who was once physically expressed, the only thing it needs to do is cross over into the light. That is continuing on your path. To pause is to be nowhere where you can really get anything done. All you are is a person without a body. And if you don't have a body, then you can't participate in this world. And if you aren't moving forward into the expansion of the fullness of your soul, then you can't participate in your multidimensional nature either. So being fixated on the physical world when you aren't physical is only going to cause you to degrade and it does not serve anything. And they cannot solve things. They need to cross over, and then if they are gonna be a spirit guide or something, great. But the only thing that a disembodied spirit needs to do when they don't have the option to, especially if they don't have the option to go into their bodies, is to cross over. And actually, you've probably heard near death experiences where people do cross over And then they go, you're going to come back. And then they actually animate back into their bodies again. The only thing to do, a medium needs to do, you don't negotiate with them. You don't say, do you have a message? Because their messages aren't going to be helpful. They need to cross over. Then they can learn how to connect with a medium or their loved ones directly. And then they can be a guide and they can give messages. And then they can be the full multidimensional person participating in love and coherence with their people. Now, that's what needs to happen. So that's what I gave myself, the space with the wall of light, separated myself from my dad, and just basically became got on task as a medium. And I let go of his freak out and his panic because I knew what I needed to do. I lifted the wall of light and I said to my father, "Did you see the light? And when you saw your parents, they were calling you forward." And he's like, he saw the light. Now here's what I know about my dad, even though we didn't have a ongoing relationship. I knew that he had a fear of going to hell because of how he had been raised in the South with hellfire and brimstone kind of religion all around. Even though his family didn't take him to church and everything, it's still just something you absorb. And he judged himself as a bad person. Some other people would judge him that way too. He was a criminal. He was an alcoholic. He was a rage-filled person. And he thought he was a bad person. Therefore, the rules are that he had learned, you go to hell. So that's one reason why earthbounds avoid moving into the light, is because they think it's damnation. So that's what my father thought for sure. And I knew that's why I told him the day before, you can come find me if you need something, because I had a strong sense that he might have a hard time just crossing over. So yes, he had seen the light. Yes, he had seen his parents and some other relatives. And so I explained to my father, I said, everyone gets healing. And this is something I tell any other earthbound too. I don't listen to their story or negotiate with them or say, what do you want to tell me? Your time, you need to turn around and you need to keep moving forward. That's the best thing. I'm not going to delay you. If someone came up to me with a broken leg, I'm not going to talk to them about their feelings about it. I'm going to get them to the hospital, right? We'll talk about your feelings later after you get medical attention. That's the critical position you are in with an earthbound. So I just basically radiated to my dad, everyone gets healing. Healing is for everyone. And he's just like, "Oh," like, how is that possible? So I added one little thing since this was a personal connection. And I said, Daddy, look at me. You made me. I'm here on this earth. Can you take credit for being able to get healing because of me? And I know that sounds, maybe to someone that sounds arrogant, but that's how he saw me. And I think that's how all parents see their children anyway. So I basically used a kind of leverage of what he might think of me, and to be able to get him to trust me and also to trust what I was saying. So he kind of just like softened a little bit. And I told him, okay, just keep looking at me. Just keep looking at me. And so basically, what I did in the astral was I walked backward toward my dad's light, and had him walk forward to me. I was like, just keep looking in my eyes, just walk forward. And then I got close to his light, we rotated, and I said, okay, just rotate and just turn and keep looking in me in the eye. And then I said, and now just relax, just let go, just surrender. And I saw my dad whoosh, just sucked in, floated in, just embraced, really embraced in. And he crossed over. Now, here's the interesting part. His body wasn't done yet. You know how we have like machines and stuff. So I think he was on a ventilator. I don't know. And it was actually 6 hours before it was over on the physical side. At any rate, I'll tell you more about that. When we concluded the crossing over, what's really interesting is that 2 friends of mine who are psychics text me at the exact time I was coming out of my meditation. And why is that interesting? Because when you're in a deep trance like that, you get some amnesia and it takes a little time to reorient, or at least it does for me. But I remember coming out and hearing like blip bling, blip bling, 2 texts from 2 other people who are mediums and psychics. So I didn't look at them right away, but I noted that they anchored in right at that time. And then And the actual messages they sent me aren't the important part. It's the fact that they actually just gave me an anchor point for the time, because for all I knew, that was 3 hours or 3 minutes. I don't know how long it was. So then when I got reoriented and, a little time later, it was 6 hours later that he did cross, but I was able to reference back to the point where that happened, his crossing over happened, to align it with what was going on in the hospital room. My, sisters and those present knew that it was time. The doctor told him it was time, and that basically, I don't know, there wasn't a recovery for him, and they wanted to wait until one person got there, and then they did the thing that they do. They euthanize, they give him a strong push of some medicine, but it was the conversation at that time that I think maybe my dad just overheard it or whatever, he felt the energetic shift and he knew for sure he couldn't go back into his body. That's when he came to me. So I was able to anchor that in because of the 2 psychics, the 2 mediums, and that's the thing. Everything that we're doing when we are in our attunement, when we are open to our extraordinary abilities, we just flow and we support coherence. We support amazing things. So they were just texting me about some other things, but they were prompted to by synchronicity so that they could support this understanding. So then it was 6 hours later that they did actually release my father's body, and that same sister told me that she felt him leave at the same time. She, called me, like, a couple of hours after that decision had been made, and I said, "Well, he crossed over already." She goes, "I knew it. I felt it. I could feel that he's not here anymore." So, those are the extraordinary things that happened around my father's passing. Now, because I was newer in my experience, even, I was a professional medium and animal communicator and everything, but it put some interesting things into context for me. Because I remember asking spirit at that time, like, why do human beings help non-physical human beings cross over? Like, why can't angels just come and snap them up? Or why can't their past loved ones come through the light and really convince them? And spirit explained to me, they're fixated on the physical world. They're fixated on humans and the life of the human world. So they're paying attention to you. And basically that's how you are a medium. You become the bridge. And then the second part of that answer was like, well, why not you? Why wouldn't it be you? And why would it be angels and not you, or past loved ones and not you? Like, you're just as important on the team. And at that time, in those instances, you actually are a little more prioritized because the entity is prioritized to how you are expressed. So that really put things into perspective for me. Now, the other thing that I was curious about was, wait a second, he left his body, almost a day before, and then when he did cross over, his body was still humming for a few hours. And they explained it to me this way, spirit, I mean, explained it to me, my guides. They said, "Well, just imagine that you're driving your car and you have sufficient gas in your car, and you put it in the driveway, put it in park, put on the emergency brake, but you don't turn it off, and the engine is still running. It can keep running because it has gas in the car. Even though there's no driver, it can run until it runs out of gas." And so basically, the the vehicle of the body can run on some electricity without the entity for a certain amount of time. Now, it will diminish because, again, with this metaphor, there's no one else to refill it with gas, and basically being, the soul being attached through the higher self into the physical form is what is giving it that infusion of the life force energy. But the life force energy that is in the body for a certain period of time can run its course. Now, sometimes it's synchronized. A lot of times it synchronizes so that there is an expiration at the same time that there is an exit. And sometimes it's not so synchronized. Also, there are times when something might happen, like a devastating accident, and the spirit will leave the body before the body actually experiences the cataclysm. So that's comforting to realize that too. So anyway, it put a lot of things in perspectives, and The reason that we make things like cars that we drive, it's actually a model of how we operate. I am the sovereign being who actually operates the car, and the car is a vehicle. Well, my soul and my consciousness, if you will, is the sovereign being that is infusing the life and the purpose and the direction and the operation into the physical expression. And the physical expression is a part of me, but it is not the limit of me. It is just this point of operation for this period that we are here. Interesting about being a medium, a couple of things, is that anyone can open up such abilities. And actually, you don't have to become a professional medium in order to have utility for such abilities. I think it's pretty great to be able to have relationships with past loved ones and angels and interdimensionals. I think it's really awesome. Why wouldn't that just be an augmentation to your life to have multidimensional relationships? Another interesting thing about having your mediumship open and expressed is that you don't have to do things like cross over spirits. It's not like there is a job description that you must fulfill. It is as nuanced as you want it to be. I actually rarely cross over spirits. It happens every now and again, but for the most part, that's not a primary part of my work. When they come into my arena, earthbounds, will have a sense that they're going to get crossed over, or they're going to be excused from being able to be perceived in the space that I am in. And another thing is that you don't have to see gruesome things as a medium. You absolutely don't have to. It has to do with your inner vibration, the way that you have set up your intentions, the way that you have released anything that you are afraid of. You do need to release fears, because whatever you're afraid of, it will that basically is a magnet for it. And just choose, then intentionally choose, calibrate, attune, set exactly what it is you want to experience. Now, I have it set so that I cross over spirits when it is the best thing for everyone concerned. I have a gatekeeper I have in place. The gatekeeper knows for the most part that I'm not here to just be crossing over earthbounds all the time. There are their loved ones and other mediums who maybe that's more of their specialization. But if they're in my space or place, basically, they have been let through so that I can facilitate, and I'm happy to do it whenever it shows up. I don't see people all mangled in car accidents and things like that. If I do see spirits, whether they are earthbound or crossed over, and they're going to indicate something about their passing, my intention about how I receive that information is primary. And my intention is, how is this helping? Who will this help? How will it help? Does it help you? Does it help your loved ones? If it doesn't, then we don't need to process. I don't need to process that. And I certainly don't need to give it to someone else to process if it's not going to help them. So, in non physical, in spirit, if you will, it doesn't it's completely responsive to your choices, your decisions, your beliefs, your inner vibration. And so we just want to get proactive about how we're setting that tone. And that is how you can be a very empowered, masterful, multidimensional medium if you so choose. So, having said that, if you want to awaken or attune your extraordinary abilities, and to live an extraordinary life by those relationships, by how you can express yourself and beyond just the physical limitations, and also perceive beyond physical limitations, and trust your own heart so that it can create an extraordinary life. If you want to open your multidimensional abilities, I suggest you check out my program, Multidimensional Mediumship. I also suggest that you check out Modern Mystic Life. In that container, we are exploring really cool mystic content while also being very grounded and applicable to our life. It is joyous, it is beautiful, it is artistic, it is lovely. And we also have Sacred Sphere, which is the skills lab, the place where you go to practice and learn even more about your multidimensional abilities, about your astral abilities, about who you are beyond the limitations of space and time. And I also have a really cool free community. It's called Wayshore Community. So you can find all of the links for all of those things below. And you can also just reach out to me. We can have a chat to see if you want to work together in some way. In the next episode of this series called Multidimensional, I'm going to tell you all about the ghosts in my studio here. This room is my studio, but I'm also in a bigger building that has many other studios in it. So in my workspace, there are ghosts and they are afraid of me. That's right, ghosts who are afraid of me. So that's what we're going to check out. Do come back, subscribe so that you can, make sure you get all the notifications for this series and all of the other episodes that come out on YouTube and my podcast. Find me on the socials. And thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.